leave these two lovely gentlemen to introduce themselves first, and then we can kick off the AI conversation.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave DiCamillo. No one actually calls me David in my company. Everyone calls me DCAM, so I can go by that on this panel, just to separate. But I'm the CTO at Code and Theory. We are a technology and creative consultancy. We are big fans of the Sanity platform, and looking forward to the conversation.
Hi, I'm David Willis. I work at Braze, which is a customer engagement platform. So we help send all the messages through your own channels, whether that's email, SMS, WhatsApp, your in-app messages. I lead our data analytics and growth engineering teams at Braze. And so this also includes our web engineering team, which is responsible for Braze.com, our Braze Learning websites, which is built on top of Sanity. And so we're looking to drive a lot of automation and productivity throughout the company, and then content is going to be a big part of that story, right? And Sanity's given us a lot of the tools to unlock that, so excited to talk about that today.
And I'm David number, I think 2 I said, SVP of Engineering Product at Sanity. Pretty recent, December I joined, but I've been working with Sanity for like 7 years, implemented it at Love Holidays, more than just a content operating system, but it actually operated most of the business. You could do a one-click deploy the entire of a travel company in another country. So that's some of the stuff we'll probably talk about today and how we automate that even more. But I think to start the conversation, I think there's like 2 sides of AI and productivity, right? There's like productivity and how product and engineering is changing drastically, and how we actually build software. And then there's the other side of it, which is like, how do we enable workflows and productivity improvements on the content side? I was wondering, what are you two doing around like AI productivity within product and engineering?
You want me to start? You want to start? This is very topical. I actually am trying to educate my entire company right now on the differences between us just vibe coding product, right, prototypes, and us taking things to market, right? We are an agency. We work for clients who have put their trust in us to build product that is standards compliant, that is not going to get hacked, that is going to be secure end to end, and that it will be performant at scale, right? And we have a culture in-house of pushing creativity through technology. And we want everyone to be adopting new AI tools. And we have been, for the last 2 years, just sort of letting a free-for-all happen. And I also run a secondary title of like CIO, so I get to oversee all of the new tools that we're buying, but also IT. And it's gotten to the point now where we are like, scary at risk because we've given way too much leeway of engineering tools to a lot of folks. Now, the good news is that through developing all that risk, we have actually started to bring a lot of our creatives and strategists like much closer to the code than they've ever been, right? And it's like so exciting to see how people who now had never the ability to write code before are taking ideas all the way down to basically PRs and handing them to the engineering team and saying, okay, can we build this, right? We are getting requirements as PRs now. And that is a very new world for us to kind of trod down. Now, again, we have to do a lot more education about what does it mean to actually build enterprise technology? What does it mean to push something out into the world? And we're working on that mostly with all of our C-suites, right? It's like my CEO is saying, I don't understand, everyone's vibe coding products out there. We should just be pushing things live. Everything should take a week. Why are we taking 6 months to build something? Well, there's actually things that we have to do. So the education side of now decoupling what does it mean to be vibe coding a product, bringing an idea to a prototype, bringing a prototype even to use internally, and then turning that into a real product that we're going to put out to the market is 2 very, very different worlds. And we're doing a lot of automation around how we bring real product to market, but the change and the shift in mentality that we've had around teams just wanting to make is the most eye-opening thing that we've had, and it's costing us a ton of cash. Jensen's comment last week may have been like the best advertising for his own product, that he expects everyone to spend half their salary in tokens. Now my founder is coming to me saying, I don't understand, why aren't we spending more? I want reports. And I'm like, whoa. Like, you understand that benefits his bottom line, right? But from an engineering perspective, there's sort of, we are building our own products to help automate how we bring things to market. We don't manage one product. We are working at any given time between 20 to 30 different products out in the market, or new things that we're bringing to the market. So we've built requirements agents that are literally taking prototypes, taking requirements documents, taking RFPs, and running them through and building technical architecture documents and writing JIRA tickets for us that we can then take into, we're using Cursor at scale, but also Claude Code. There's a lot of automation in that we built. We built our own, skills GitHub. We've got our own agents that are writing and authoring and planning tasks for us. And then we've got a tool that we call Quality Intelligence, which is basically our pipeline, surface view into the quality of what's going on and sort of our backstop for all code that's being generated to make sure we're at the right standard and level that we feel is enterprise grade. So there's a lot we can dive into there, but it's very top of mind because I just built the deck today and presented it to our team about how are we going to break apart this vibe code world from this enterprise world.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that on that side. And from my perspective, one of the things we've been seeing is historically there's been a bifurcation between product is you define the what and the why, right? And the engineers is the how. And I think those lines are blurring drastically in a way they've never done before. And I think it's even more important now. One things I tell all my engineers is you need to know the what and the why of what you're building, because we can't have you building features rapidly and creating a Frankenstein's monster of a product, right? It's very, very easy to do that now where people, all of you have probably seen this throughout a lot of AI tools, kind of whiplash. New features come in, new features leave, they change. What is the user experience we ultimately want to drive for? What's the ultimate impact we need to accomplish and value we're delivering? And that's more important than ever. And we need both the product and the engineering side to embody that in our workflows. And then the other half of that, to your point, our development velocity, how do we enable people to drive rapid development with the prototypes, all the ideas that are coming in. And I think context, which I think is the most popular word happening now and throughout the market, how do we bring context into your development workflows, right? So we've been really focused on how do we enable your developer environments to have context, not only to GitHub and your database, but also to the content, right? Whether that's your marketing content, your product requirement stocks, and so on. So those two halves are things that we're focusing a lot on when we think about velocity.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very advanced, the way that you're thinking about some of these things. I think Sanity is at this point at the moment where I look at a lot of AI and the way that you operate workflows. You need to invest a lot of time into it, right? And I think that there's two things that we don't have a lot of. It's time and the types of people that think as leaders. And I think the way that you think when you abstract and you start thinking about problems with AI, you can't think about it as an IC anymore because you're operating agents, right? You're operating a team. And so you have to coordinate and you have to think about how are you getting them to be as efficient as possible. And I think it's really interesting when you talk to engineers who are I don't really use AI because it doesn't write the code like I want it to. And then you've got someone else who's I've got 35 agents doing all of the things that I want and I've just shipped 5 products. And I think it's that, it's the abstraction of thinking and being a bit higher level of what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? How are you going to do it? And how are you going to get everyone in your agent team to execute on it and do it really, really well? And I think that's going to be the big differentiator, right? And as you said, I think product design and engineering, they're becoming a blur. And what you'll have is I think edges of those 3 functions where you'll have a designer be able to make something to really be creative about a problem space, an engineer be able to solve something architecturally because they've done it before, and a product person being able to do customer research at a different level. But equally, they'll all be able to spin around and be here's a PR on the thing that I wanted to get done. The thing that we are looking at right now, which I think is really interesting, there's a very interesting article about it, which is cognitive debt. And so, the world is now moving into, if I can ship 10,000 lines of code a minute, how am I documenting it? How do I know what's happening? Does the black box even matter if it's operating, right? And I think that is really interesting when you start thinking about enterprise software. And so that's one of the big worries, which is okay, well, we've shipped 17 products in a week. Do you know how they work? And someone's I have no idea. I wrote them in Rust. So, and I think that's the sort of thing where we want to be careful about it, but equally, it's important to get everybody to operate and test it and I don't think enough people have fully got into it, because the time poorness of like, I haven't done it, right? Like I actively haven't built my ideal workflows, because it's like, I think of it as I was talking about it just earlier. Like if you buy a Linux machine, you're going to spend 3 weeks customizing it to perfection. I don't have the time for that. Like I buy a Mac and just get it up and running, right? And I think it's the same with AI nowadays, which is you need to find the sweet spot for you. And I think we need to work with engineering teams and product teams to give them the space to do that, which you've done, right? To then enable them to be as effective as possible and onboard themselves. Because I think a lot of people are just like, they've not found the perfect workflow to then get started and hit that productivity.
I think the engineering mentality is actually shifting quite a bit, and we're actually looking at overhauling our whole recruiting process, right? For how we interview for engineers, because no longer is it about just what have you accomplished and what have you been able to do, show me the product, tell me about it. It's how well can you manage an agent, right? And we have not put this into practice yet. And if you guys all steal it, please credit me. This is stuff that I've seen other companies do, but we want to brief people on the way in, spend 90 minutes with them, have the first hour where they can just have our tools, go at it, attack the brief, and then for the last 30 minutes, just have a conversation with a panel of us, right? And what we want to have the discussions about is, where did the AI fall down? What were your next steps? What were the flaws in the architecture that you found? How would you carry this forward? Have the real structural, like CS conversation with them, because that's what matters, is the rationale over it rather than the actual skill to create now, right? The skill to create is the commodity. The understanding of what you've created and where the gaps are is the value. And that's what we want to now assess all new inbound engineers.
And that's where the dilemma comes about senior software engineers, junior software engineers experience, and like the big, the unknown right now, which is like what's happening in that world. Because if you don't know what you're building and you've never done it before, how do you know that the thing is right?
Right? A lot of the kids we have are some of the best.
Yeah. I mean, but it's like that learning piece, right? That you have to get really deep into.
10,000 mistakes,
Exactly. No, it's super interesting. I guess, like, have you measured the ROI of it? I think that's like the most contentious but it's really interesting, right? Like there's businesses out there that are now selling product to measure AI ROI. I think it's very hard, but like my previous place actually measured it through the lens of a number of incidents. And so basically as they started shipping more AI, incidents doubled. And then like they went through that feedback loop of, okay, well, we need to probably do some work around this to make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't know if you saw the AWS outage, right? Like that was like, oh, how do we fix this? We'll shove a human in the loop. And so I think like that's really interesting, because that's like similar to thinking about content operations, right? And like how do you manage governance there as well?
I think that's super interesting that, we all saw the AWS article where like now a senior engineer needs to review every junior's code, right? And that's something that got sent around by all of our staff engineers, of course, in our internal channels. But I think when we think about measuring ROI, it actually hasn't changed at all. It actually is just forcing us to do things we were all too lazy to do before, which is like, are you actually driving customer acquisition? Are you actually driving increased adoption or increasing onboarding rates? And how do we measure that better in ways that we haven't done before? Because now it's so much more easier to create a bunch of features that may or may not be driving to those outcomes. And that's what we've been trying to think about. We have a tool called Span, which is a way that we've used to track pull requests per engineers. And now we can plug in like how many pull requests per tokens you've spent, right, through all of your AI tokens and all your AI tools. But I think what we actually want to focus on is like, what are those product analytics goals that we have? What are those customer acquisition goals that we have? And are we actually driving towards that? And that's where data becomes more important than ever, I think, actually. Because now there's real costs associated with, I need to give every engineer $50,000 in Claude token credits. Do they deserve that much, right?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's like shifting onto that kind of governance piece, right? With like the fact that with AI now, we're seeing content being published way faster than it was before. And I think there's a really interesting kind of tension between like the right content, governance around it, and then like the ability to just get it shipped, right? And I think, Sanity fits perfectly into that, because the MCP, I can basically write 25 articles in a couple of minutes and I'm done. But there's no guardrails, right? I don't know how you two are thinking about guardrails within content and like publishing it, but I think it's going to be a really big like thing to try and tackle, and also do it in a way that isn't then actively slowing you down even further than what you were doing even before AI workflows existed.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the way we try to sell Sanity to our clients is that it is the source of truth for your content, right? And the longer that source of truth, the further it goes back, the more authenticity it can have in either generating content or being the authority to external sources when it's coming to talk to your brand, to your content, to whatever you want to convey. The idea of structuring content as data is the exact right foundation for how AI wants to consume. This is what Magnus talks about. This is what you guys all talk about. I mean, this is the literal linchpin in us closing deals with Sanity. And content to us is never going to be the commodity that it is right now, right? People will still crave human craft. People still want the high touch of, a real insight, right? And AI can, yes, generate a lot. And yes, there's moments for generating content. We believe that for real. But the value of understanding what is in the archive and what does this brand stand for, and the history of the content as a single data store is an asset that I think will just pay off in the long run as people, look to what is authoritative, what is the right fact checks, right? What are the things that we trust in the world? And that's still going to have that human touch to it where, how do we keep it? How do we display it? How do we disseminate it is also, critical to why Sanity can be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, human content is going to be the most valuable thing, right?
Totally agree.
Yeah, that's the only differentiator. If everyone's using the same AI agents, right? Like, how do you differentiate? It's people, right? I think one of the funny things was, I remember the first time I connected Slack and G Drive to my ChatGPT instance, and I started asking questions like, what did DCAM say in Slack the past year? And did he say anything like scandalous and that's publicly available? And it's interesting to see like the data fidelity. You can pull up all these things that you once wouldn't have found given federated search with AI. And that's now even more true with like public content and other content that you want to show to your customers, show to your end users, right? And for us, one of the big challenges now that we're fighting is how do we get everything into one system that we can put governance on? And so we think Sanity is that, and we're fighting against different teams with different systems, different ownership levels, and some people build in Google Drive, some people build in Confluence, some people build in this other LMS that they use. And the ability to generate content in a governed way and make sure we're showing the most relevant content as well as the right content as well as the up-to-date content is very hard to do when the systems are very spread out across different ways. And so the beauty of Sanity is you're allowing us to build that governance in a customized way and that we can do so effectively, and then we can showcase how we can automate other things. And I think that's our first step, actually. Just let's generate in one place so then all the skills, tools that we build on top of the platform can apply to the rest of the content system.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it comes back to that point that it was like, oh, it's fine to write a draft in Google Docs, right? And I think that for me is the critical kind of separation between Sanity and like whatever writing tool you want to use. I don't want to build another Google Docs. Like I don't think anybody does. And so I think like for us, the next stage is like, how do we give you the ability to just pull content from wherever else, to then structure it, because we can do that really easily with AI now. So you do have that single source of truth, but you're not creating that friction where, the studio is probably not the best editing surface for like, I need focus mode and I want to write in this specific way. And that's totally fine. We're like, I don't claim to be experts in that area. And so that for me is going to be the really critical one. And then the second piece is like workflow primitives. Because at the moment that you're able to ingest content and trigger those durable workflows that are doing things with that content, you're ending up with like, putting it all in a structure that you can then understand and having one single place and source of truth, which I think is like, that's where we're going with AI and automations, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah, I think the agent context product that Magnus was showing earlier is actually a really good example of this, where we acquired an AI company earlier this year or last year now. And when someone asks questions like, what are Braze's AI products? We have a lot more documentation on our old legacy stuff, and that's what shows up more. And so leveraging something like agent context, where it's like, here's the core information we want to be pushing forward, and making that available is really interesting and powerful. And so like to your point, like how do we think about which content we want to highlight more and which content we should deprioritize is the key thing for us.
I mean, we believe in the power of AI to help gather and brief, right, individuals, but the human side of it has got to be there, right? And even if we have agents writing all the way through, we still believe that the human touch has to exist. And, you know, yes, we want to be able to fact check all the AIs and put all that, you know, technology to work, but ultimately it's got to have a vibe. It's got to have a feel. It's got to have some sort of humanity to it. And that's where that interface still allows the human to go in, make the changes, make it ownable, and then make that part of the actual, you know, lexicon of the publication, right? And that's the power, right? And building and continuing to build that archive is again the fundamental source of how things will you know get created in the future. So the more effort you put into content creation, the more effort we put into you know documenting the human input, I think is you know a critical component of this, right? Don't let the AIs go by themselves forever.
Like I couldn't agree more, and actually that kind of that specific piece. So the vision for Sanity from like the editorial side, and I actually can't draw it yet, but it's like exception first handling, where you're moving from this world of like, I'm entering a studio, I'm finding my document, I'm making changes, to I'm being told what changes. And this is the perfect example of what you showed, right? Which was, that's part exception first handling. You're showing me the things that I need to care about to then drive content from there, right? And that's a very different model than how like editors operate today. They're going off and doing research themselves. It's a pull, not push situation, right? And with AI and workflows, you're able to kind of flip that around and be like, well, we'll tell you what you should be looking at or the areas that are of interest to you, and you can zoom into that, and that's where you're doing your editing, right? And then our view is like the studio should be that like space of like confident publish, which is like, I've got my content diff, I'm cool with it, publish, right? If you do that constantly through the MCP, we might end up in some disastrous zones. But then again, my prediction with MCP is I believe there'll be a situation where MCP will connect to a website. And you would then basically have an MCP in chat, and the callback will open up the website of the state of the thing that you're trying to edit in, right? And so we're sort of planning for that world where you might want to do batch updates in the MCP, but we'll then just redirect you to the releases page and show you those batch updates, because I think that's going to be the critical way of like, everyone's going to have different operating workflows, and that's fine. If you're API first and you're thinking through that lens, then it will help a lot of the editors.
I think the interesting part about this is it goes to your point about just newsrooms' unwillingness to change. Just because we can build it doesn't mean people are going to use it, which is the hardest thing for us to stomach. And we spend an inordinate amount of time with our clients just helping them understand the workflow changes that are going to be coming. And there's a lot of people who are diehard. I do my process. This is the way it goes. I'm in Google Docs. I workshop it there. I sleep on it. I send it to 5 people. And it's just the way that they're going to be for the rest of their lives. I think the change management behind all of this is actually the hardest part, because I agree. I think your vision is amazing, right? I'm sitting in Claude all day doing my job and doing the other things that matter. I'm authoring, and then I can just push through the MCP and have things show and have a conversation with the content and change it as I deem fitting. That workflow for people is going to be so difficult to stomach, even though that's basic old school WYSIWYG, kind of mentality, right? Where I'm just in the workshop in a Claude interface versus in a Google Doc. But that change management, I think, is the hardest thing to stomach for a lot of our clients.
Yeah, I think you have to take them on that journey, right? And the reality of a lot of these things, which we see with the businesses and startups are happening today, is you win or you lose, right? And that's what's going to happen, right? The old schoolers will not maintain that velocity and that ability to innovate, and there will be the new world. And that is what we're seeing right now today when we talk about like product engineering and design as well, right? So it'll be really interesting. I think the hardest thing for us from a design perspective is like, how do you design this? What is the future? Because I don't believe it's chat, right? Like I think like everything is going to become, I can't begin to imagine websites that are just like a chatbot. Like visuals have to exist. We're visual people a lot of the times, and so there is going to be that like shift into something that is a hybrid. And I think that's going to be a really interesting like exploration of like how do you do that in a really seamless way that gives people that confidence of like this are my visual changes, but I'm also able to make all of these changes, which the content agent does do today, but it's still a chat, right? And so I think that there's definitely going to be some really interesting innovation in design in the next I say 6 to 12 months, but it's probably going to be 1 month because someone's going to come up with a new model and do it in one shot.
I mean, screen as surface is, the one dated thing I think that we've not been able to get beyond, right? The metas have tried, everyone's putting forth, and OpenAI and Johnny Ive are going to come out with something at some point in time, right? The new interface. But my kids interface with my Claude, they don't type, but they are very adept at talking to her, talking to him. It's her for them. I have 2 little girls, so a girl voice is helpful. But that speech to output, speech to whatever I want to get is, I think a paradigm that is very underserved by the business community at this point. I actually see older people doing that and then younger people doing that, but the rest of us have all been groomed on screens and text. I think the paradigm shift is going to come hard. Again, we are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
We want to do what we have been taught to do. So I'm looking forward to it in the next month to see what comes out.
The new leaked Anthropic model. How many of you use Whisper Flow? How many of you have not even heard of Whisper Flow? Interesting. Okay, check it out. I'm not selling it. I don't even know the founders, but like I actually shifted my entire working mode to talking. And so like Whisperflow just transcribes it, then it does it in a formatted way as well. And so like you can just do that. It's a weird in Slack messages because I'm very blunt in Slack. And then when I talk, it's just and then it's very obvious that it's a transcribed, but it's a, oh, well, there you go. See, I'm too time poor for this.